There are a lot of ways to get to your strengths, not all of which are obvious. After all, what is a strength? You might assume that a strength is, well, something you're good at, right? But ask yourself, relative to what? Maybe relative to a quantifiable standard like being able to do an Excel data regression analysis or perform all the required skills of a rescue diver as defined by the National Dive Rescue Association. Maybe your strength is relative to another person, meaning that it's a strength compared to what others can do. For example, as a research scientist, relative to my peers, I document experiments better than most. And maybe you consider certain skills as strengths because you're better at them than other things you do. This doesn't necessarily mean that your other skills and attributes are weak, just not as strong as your strengths. It's an important point since, relative to other candidates, your weaknesses may indeed be much stronger than their strengths. You're probably thinking this is rhetorical crapola and that I'm being a little nitpicky. Then again, making an assumption on something as critical as your strengths is probably worth a little forethought. Strengths are made up of all three. It's just that you need to know well ahead of time which bucket each strength falls into. For example, relative to a standard is applicable when there are minimum quantifiable criteria to meet. You can either do a regression analysis using Excel or you can't. It's pretty binary when there's a standard. As you look to identify these types of strengths, consider where your actions have required or met some objectively established standard. Relative to others is a little stickier. It's much easier to describe than it is to define. Most people would agree that people working on a team tend to know who is and isn't good at what. For example, everyone agrees that Ted is your guy when it comes to making the final presentation, but you wouldn't let him near your slide rule even for a bucket of HP Scientific calculators. Then again, over in the psychiatry business division, Johnny cooks up a batch of medicinal amphetamine better than a guy living in his mother's basement on 9th and Main. But you would never willingly let him talk to another human being. Neither example is meant to be a criticism so much as a way to call out the reality of our shared experience. Being a relative strength, you're limited by your exposure of who you work with, your awareness of other skills, and, for a job hunt, your competition. With strengths like these, be cognizant of the breadth of what and who you know. If your network is broad, then feel comfortable claiming that, relative to others, you're good at whatever it is. But if the breadth of your exposure is small, it's easy to base your conclusions on a one-rat study, only to have an interviewer call you out on it. A strength relative to your other skills is just that. It might be a skill that you use all the time, something you enjoy and have passion about, something stronger than your other strengths, or something that just isn't as weak as your other weaknesses. There's a couple of ways to get to your strengths. On a scratch pad, begin making a list of what you believe to be your strengths and continue to add to it as we go through this exercise. Personality assessments are also a good supplement. StrengthsFinder, Myers-Briggs, Wilson Learning Styles, and Enneagrams are four of my favorites. How about performance reviews, recommendations, or recognition? Assuming you have some, they could be ripe with descriptions of your strengths. Finally, think about what others have told you. Wow, you sure are a great public speaker, or I'm envious of how easily you help people express themselves at a meeting. Having identified what you believe your strengths are, the key to this exercise is to confirm that you indeed have experiences to back them up. Otherwise, how can you prove it? After all, saying you have a strength with no experience to back it up falls into the world of opinion or blind self-confidence. If this is the case, it might be time to take it off your list of strengths or add additional experiences to back it up.